In the summer of 2016, fresh off the successes of the original series House of Cards and Orange is the New Black, and after the January announcement of an international expansion into 130 new territories, Netflix released what would soon become its new flagship show, Stranger Things, the first television show from the screenwriting pair, the Duffer Brothers, who at the time had only been working in Hollywood for 6 years and had only one movie credit to their name. The brothers had pitched the concept to over 15 networks before the show eventually got picked up, as a lot of executives were hesitant about a TV show intended for adults with a majority children cast. They also really wanted a 22-episode season, as was the norm for the time, but the brothers were insistent on a miniseries, and originally wanted Stranger Things to end after the first season. Nobody could have predicted that this indie show would become one of the biggest Netflix shows ever, or that it would come to define a new age for the streaming era and essentially Netflix's streaming identity. With its 80s nostalgia, coming of age tropes, and an incredible cast full of depth driving its endless forward momentum, it emerged during a time when Netflix had and was continuing to gain cultural prominence, and they had a lot to dedicate to this show in terms of marketing and budget. It helped Netflix establish legitimacy like no other. Netflix and Stranger Things built each other. The complexity of the characters, the urgency and tension in its world building, the subtle greatness in its writing. Stranger Things was phenomenal in its debut season, and it was only ever meant to be one season, but Netflix just couldn't leave any money on the table. However, in infusing capitalist greed into a landmark show that was originally great because it was so niche, it not only undermined the artistic integrity of the show, but it broke a cardinal rule of storytelling. Never begin without the end in sight. Otherwise, you get, well, Stranger Things Season 5. It truly is hard to believe that the Stranger Things we will remember today is the evolution of what was originally a dark, wretched, niche 80s horror show. The characters have long lost the grounding that once made them so endearing. The plot has grown so big it became as uncontainable, unruly, and inexplainable as the Mind Flayer itself. The show's consistent attempt to make each season bigger and better killed what originally made it intimate and thus great. The decline was consistent, but gradual enough that it only became crystal clear to a lot of people in its final season. And when you consider the real-life events such as the pandemic, the writer's strike, it's clear that Stranger Things just outgrew its time. The time that it was released was a golden era, a novel and intriguing time in television history, which was just waiting to be written. And it's one that we are not ready to let go of if conformity gates. The theory that there was a secret knife episode to be released after the finale was an indication of anything. Now, anyone can come up with a cool new idea. Ideas are a dime a dozen, but it takes true talent to cement that creativity within an execution that makes sense within the constraints of fictional storytelling, while also fully delivering on the original creative vision. And the Duffer Brothers did do that in the first season. Or maybe it was Lee Yanyok, Ross Duffer's ex-wife, that he divorced during season 5 production. I don't know. That's what the streets are saying. But for a show to last a decade requires either a premise conducive to a serialized format that can be replicated forever, a la Law and Order or even Grey's Anatomy, or it needs sufficient changes within its cast or scope, neither of which were possible, at least in a satisfactory manner, for Stranger Things. I remember being very satisfied with the first season and surprised that there was more to come, as clearly the show wanted to end. I didn't really see where the show was going to take it from here, and clearly neither did the writers. The plot expands from one monster to many, many monsters to a massive monster with psychic powers and a limitless form to a corrupted man who was once a little boy with powers, but actually no, maybe it is the massive monster that was controlling the little boy with powers. Each season we are told, no, it's actually this being that was behind it all along, except it clearly was never the original intention. So by the time we land on Vecna in season 4, despite how intriguing of a villain he is, at least at the start, we have strayed a very long way from where it all began. Meanwhile, the characters largely stay stagnant. Well, for example, was the boy who got kidnapped season 1. And he never stops being the boy who got kidnapped in season 1. Every season, his life was in mortal danger in some capacity, and that is his character arc. 11 was probably the most layered character in the first season, but when they literally resurrected her, they had no idea what to do with her. So they just had her be the girl with powers who conveniently steps in to save the day when it's all said and done. Season 2, she literally has nothing to do with the main plot and is off exploring her own background, only for all that to be dropped because none of it has any relevance to the Hawkins plotlines. The loss of synthesis between the characters and the plot is, in my opinion, the main downfall of this show, motivated by its need to show off its really big CGI budget. But what it failed to recognize is that part of what made its characters great was their union with the plot that drove the arcs. And what made the plot great was how it was so connected to the lore and world building previously established. And so when we lost the lore, we got lots of plot holes. And when we lost the plot, we lost the characters. Would Stranger Things be as big as it is if it only had one season? Maybe not, so I'm not really mad at its 10-year tirade, but by no means was its downfall inevitable because of its length. It could have had multiple very strong seasons, and many shows have. Very few, in fact, begin knowing how long they are going to go for and how they want to end the story. But good storytellers can extend storylines, picking up threads and continuing them, using the character foundations to direct the plot and the rest of the story. And oh, how Stranger Things had characters. We originally meet the gang in season 1 and the setting to which they are integral as they sit in the basement of Mike's home playing Dungeons and Dragons, and oh boy, does this set the stage for the rest of the show. Mike is positioned as the leader, Dustin the know-it-all nerd, Lucas the comedic one, and Will the sweet and innocent one. But what is quite good about Stranger Things is that no one is confined to any specific trope. Each character is quite complex, and the reason the show is able to do this so well is because each character was very well defined by their connection to the plot, and watching them all navigate this traumatic event built their characters and our connection to them. Will's mother, Joyce, being told she is crazy as she seeks him, but trusting in herself, her maternal instinct, and those goddamn Christmas lights. The Sheriff Hopper, who has grown lonely and desperate even as he still grieves the loss of his daughter. Nancy losing her best friend and blaming herself for leaving her that night to be with her boyfriend Steve, who really should have died in the first season. No offense. And so becoming a human weapon to avenge her, uniting with Jonathan as he struggles with his brother, who at this point he thinks is dead. He begins planning his funeral, and his mother refuses to entertain the possibility that maybe Will isn't coming back, leaving him alone in his grief. A mysterious bald-headed girl who shows up in the woods with a minimal ability to speak but an enhanced capacity to do things we have never seen before. We are instantly plunged into the world of Hawkins, a small town where nothing crazy ever happens until it does. It was a fascinating premise from the start. It was mystery, horror, coming of age, and it had an effortless ability to remain prominent in the cultural consciousness for long after the first season finished airing. That was in large part because of how it drew on the nostalgia of the 80s and also appealed to multiple different demographics. I remember watching season 1 in 9th grade homeroom and one of the well-known mean teachers walking in on me. I thought she was about to give me detention, but instead she said, "Are you watching Stranger Things?" That show had the power to unite people across generations. I still so clearly remember so many scenes from the first season because of the emotional impact they had on me in that moment, and they are well embedded in my mind because of how well they were crafted. I watched the scene where Will gets taken so many times because I was looking for clues. I covered my eyes when Hopper recovered the fake Will body from the morgue and cut it open only to find stuffed cotton on the inside. I held back screams when Nancy hid behind a tree to avoid the Demogorgon, laughed with Joyce in the cabinet with the lights, although I didn't quite understand how Will could see the letters she put on the wall from the other side, but that's besides the point. And I was so endeared by the relationship between a confused young Elle and the boys who took her in. I loved this show, and it was a huge part of my adolescence and my falling in love with television to begin with. You could say it's part of the reason why I'm here on this channel today, and I will forever be grateful for that. And I deeply feel the pain of those who hated the last season. Disappointed isn't the word. Following all these characters along as they come to the truth of what really happened to Will in the A, B, and C plots, the boys with 11 who they keep hidden in Mike's basement, Joyce and Hopper when Hopper finally gets on board, and Nancy and Will's older brother Jonathan, each team is missing a piece of the puzzle that the others possess. And it is only inevitable that eventually they all come together to sort it out. And the fact that so much is still left unanswered at the end of it all is part of the allure of the show. What absolutely hands down made the first season of Stranger Things so good and also very unique was its ability to subtly develop its plot and its characters in an intriguing and fascinating way that truly felt as if you were watching a story unfold, not simply a written fictional interpretation. It was embedded in the dialogue and the way the scenes are shot and how each of the characters interacts and how the actors bring them to life. It was impossible to not feel connected to the characters and drawn deeply into their experiences because from the start, we are there in the mystery with them. And because we too are only given bits and pieces as we go along, we are equally as invested and just on the hook as the characters are. We are right there with them trying to figure things out. Not one of the characters had all of the answers. Even the Hawkins laboratory, which caused all of this, and 11 with her powers, did not fully understand the Upside Down and what it was they had unleashed upon Hawkins. And they definitely did not expect for poor little Will to be kidnapped. They absolutely did not expect for his friends and family to be so formidable in recovering him, to the point that 11, who had been manipulated and brainwashed her entire life, decided to help them. While Mike, Dustin, and Lucas were also particularly interested with learning the secrets of the Upside Down, Joyce and Hopper could not have cared less and only wanted to get Will back safe and sound. Everyone had their specific role to play, meaning nothing was redundant, everything felt necessary, and the finale when Will is brought back feels satisfying and earned. Watching 11 sacrifice herself in order to do so feels as if her entire life has been building to this moment, that this is what she was always meant to do, and now she can finally rest, freed from the violent expectations and deeply traumatic semblance of a childhood from which she suffered. She closes this chapter for good by recognizing who the true bad guys are and becoming a hero forever and always. At least until the next season, when they decide to bring her back, because Netflix loves money, and with her character arc having already been complete, she is frozen in time for the remaining duration of the show. The Duffer Brothers have said that they did have a document written out explaining some more details and lore about the Upside Down, which I assume was the starting point for when they decided to return for Season 2. Season 2 revolves around deepening the lore around the Upside Down, introducing more monsters, this time in the form of Demodogs, who are all connected to a hive mind that Will was also infected with during his time in the Upside Down. This season does continue some of the very good plot foundations and character building we see in the first season, and it is nice to check up on these characters and see what they've been doing. The second season begins a year after the first one ends, but there is a huge problem with this season, and it is, in my opinion, the main problem that Stranger Things has always had coming out of the first season that can explain most of its issues. It focuses more on the plot than the characters. At this point in the show, the action, the villain, and the storyline begin to become bigger than any of the characters, instead of being part of their development, and their development intrinsic to the plot. And the show becomes well and truly about understanding and defeating the villain, rather than the coming-of-age drama that was so character-centric in the first season. It is here that we first begin to get lost in the sauce. Will gets attacked again because that's all he ever really does. Joyce goes back into Mama Bear mood. Hopper is rejuvenated into a new position as a surrogate father for Elle. You are like Papa! Which is honestly one of my favorite parts of this season. I think that it was a natural progression of his character. The kids try to go back to school and have normal childhoods, but it genuinely never ends. And we also get a bunch of new characters, including Bob, who was killed off at the end of the season because the main cast is invincible and someone does have to die. We do also get Max and her stepbrother Billy, who are truly strong characters and remind us a lot of the allure of the first season with their introduction. They're the new kids in town and they moved from California. It makes sense that these two characters end up driving a lot of the main plot and development for the rest of the show, as the writers had exhausted their resources with the original cast from season 1 and was clearly stuck on what to do with these characters. 11 isn't even there in Hawkins. She's off exploring some of the previously introduced context from season 1 and attempting to find her mom and her family, her sister, Aid, another girl that she was in the Hawkins laboratory was. But don't worry, she comes back just in the nick of time to save the day because who the hell else is going to do it, closing the gate and severing the hive mind for good? Or so we think. A lot of the dynamics from this season are blatant copy and paste from the first season, but with new added plot discoveries in order to keep things fresh and new. The characters really do not change that much. They are still in the predefined roles from season 1. In a lot of ways, they're Dungeons and Dragons player roles, and it comes at a time when these characters are maturing and should be changing quite a lot. Dustin and Lucas get into a bit of a rivalry over Max, who they both like, but Dustin is also hiding a baby demidog in his room, which is crazy considering what he saw the Demigorgon was capable of in the first season, but not to worry, the other characters definitely make that clear to him. The kids must band together to save the town again from a hidden and unique threat that nobody can know the truth about for some reason. The season still echoes a lot of the intrigue and prestige of the first season as we explore what it means that it's not truly over. And the writing and the scenes are still fantastic. Will's fears and anxieties due to PTSD are well and truly justified as he fights for control. One of the strongest scenes this season is when the Hawkins gang is attempting to hide their location from Will so that the hive mind cannot use him to find them. It's filled with tension and intrigue. It's amazing. Will being used as a weapon against them is an absolute brilliant idea, and seeing the kid whose innocence and survival the entire first season revolved around become, in a sense, their enemy is a fascinating dynamic. Understanding the concept of the Heimbrand is also quite interesting, and although Elle has little to do with the main plot, it would have been interesting to see Elle grapple with the fact that she's literally a serial killer. Nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about all of the people that Elle has killed and how that probably does affect her as an individual. And it just keeps going until the end of the show. What? How are we just not going to address this? This can be a very interesting dynamic to explore with her character. Watching her seek her family and find her sister, although it doesn't really go anywhere and in fact leads to one of the most disliked episodes in maybe not the entire show, not that season 5 is out, but up until that point for sure, it's still very touching. Eventually, however, the constant attempts to amplify the plot leads to contradictions, particularly in season 4 when Vecna is introduced with no real explanation of what exactly has he been doing all this time. It was never Stranger Things plot that made the show so good, honestly, in my opinion. It was always the characters, the plot. It was interesting, it was fascinating. Yes, it's not what made Stranger Things as popular as it was. I don't think anyone was particularly as invested in the story of the Upside Down and how it came to be as we were in seeing Will come home safe, or seeing 11 be free from the tyrannical rule under which she suffered. So why? And season 3. Did we add the whole Russia and Cold War element to the plot? This season followed the gang in the summer. Max and Lucas are now dating, 11 and Mike are going starring, and Hopper is flipping out with his keep the door open 3 inches rule. To be fair, I think the kids are at this point, 13? Kind of crazy.
11 is 14? I was making out with Mike at 13.
The writers are so lost on Will's character, they decide to make him gay, which wouldn't be a problem if they had actually thought it through and actually explored what it meant for his character to be there at this time. Max's brother Billy, the menace that he is a lifeguard flirting with Mike and Nancy's mom. And have you seen her husband? I don't blame her. Dustin comes back from nerd camp or whatever, and Steve is working at the ice cream shop at the mall with a new character named Robin, who is played by the very talented Maya Hawke, but is also kind of out of place in the story, as out of place as the Technicolor editing. You see how many goddamn characters we have? And no, none of them ever die. They just introduce new characters so they can kill them that same season. We'll talk more about that later. Remember when this was a dark and danky horror show in the first season? Why is everything so damn bright now? The Mind Flayer was teased at the end of season 2, showing that although the gate was closed, something was still lurking on the other side. This season, I would say, is the first to try to attempt to answer the question of what exactly do the bad guys want. As when the Mind Flayer infects Billy, eventually tragically killing him, we hear the Mind Flayer speak through him for the first time. And how did the gate even get back open again? Because the Russians were experimenting on how they could somehow use this to their advantage. Of course, the evil Russian storyline, always so convenient. There's another character introduced, fan favorite Alexei, but they also introduced him just so they could kill him at the end of the season. It's so obvious what they're doing here. You're not slick. It's another season of the main cast being split up and exploring the general mystery separately. One would think by now they would have learned to work together, as the context and specifics that made that feature make sense in season 1 no longer exist. But no, it's just another example of how, although the plot continues to evolve, the characters themselves don't really continue to evolve. The dynamics remain exactly the same, and it doesn't, after a certain point, even make logical sense. It's just, why would they keep going through all of these difficult conflicts and not grow and change from it? It feels as if every season we are picking up an entirely new plot line without retaining the lessons from the previous seasons, and it feels a bit disjointed. Crazy things keep happening, and the characters may be intelligent enough to avert secret Russian spies and uncover the Mind Flayer's master plan, but communication is still far out of reach. One thing I did really like this season was Elle and Max's friendship developing. It was super cute. Unfortunately, that is the first and last that we see of that. Erica is also a delight this season,
Until you bald bastard.
although she never really grows out of the comic relief role they built for her. You see what I mean? Nothing really changes, and I think now that we're at season 3, it's blatantly obvious and not really intriguing to watch. Something interesting about Stranger Things is that it revolves around families, yet the familiar dynamics are severely underused. Mike and Nancy are both main character members, yet they barely interact, and the parents have no idea what's going on. Somehow this is a small town where everyone talks and nothing ever really happens, except that's far from the truth. Most people in Helkins still don't understand what's happening. At some point, somebody needs to catch on. What is wrong with you guys? The kids do develop a little bit this season, with most of the boys now being in relationships and exploring what that means. Will, however, is gay and has a huge crush on Mike, and he's exploring that a little bit, but not really. I think they really begin to explore that in season 4, but it all really comes to a head in the mall when the Mind Flayer creates a new body for itself using the body of poor deceased Billy and a bunch of rats and other body mass. And of course, Elle steps in again to save the day. I know she is tired of these people, and Hopper dies because he's too close to the gate when that happens, except no, he's not dead. He's somehow transported to Russia in the mid-credit scene of the finale, which is never explained. The way that Elle's supposed death in season 1 is never explained. When did they have the ability to teleport? And it's interesting how it only happens when someone was supposed to have died. The Duffer Brothers have a habit of simply never explaining things that do not make sense. This happened off screen, or that is up for interpretation. Well, what do we need you for then? Aren't you supposed to be making things make sense? But okay, now we are in Russia for some portion of season 4. One thing about Stranger Things is that the main cast has to be split up, because at this point there are so many characters that have so many talents and perspectives that if they were together, the main conflicts would be solved within a week. Season 4 is my second favorite season. Is it the second best season? No, I think season 2 is probably closest to season 1 in terms of quality and writing. It's where the cracks start to show, but not when they fully open. But I do like season 4 for two main reasons. Number one, Vecna was such an intriguing villain when he was originally revealed, and the way in which he was revealed was chef's kiss. Oh my gosh, the moment where Elle is going through her memories and trying to figure out what exactly happened with the massacre, but also Nancy's in the house learning the truth about Henry and realizing Henry and number one, they're one and the same. Yes, they ate that so bad. And number two, the running up that hill scene with Max, absolute perfection. If I only could make a deal with God and I'd get him to swap our places as Max plans to sacrifice herself, but ultimately decides to return to her home, to run to her home, to run up that hill where she belongs. Are you kidding me? That was cinema. That was fantastic. Lucas made me sick of that song, but I never will be. Max is an absolute delight this season, and Netflix truly screwed Sadie Sink over with their two-part structure, completely screwing their chances for Emmy nominations, as they released part 2 after the deadline for the Emmys, and they unluckily did so the exact year that the Emmys changed the rule so that later episodes could no longer be considered as part of a full season if certain episodes were released before the deadline. Honestly, it kind of sounds personal. You would think that Netflix would learn their lesson, honestly, after this and the mess of Bridgerton season 3, but no. Listen, I have no problem waiting until the whole season comes out and deleting my subscription after that. You are not going to wring me dry for my money. But this season follows Elle, Will, and Joyce now living in California after the, quote, death of Hopper. Most of the gang is in Hawkins. Dustin and Mike have made a new friend called Eddie, who they play D&D with as he stalkers to graduate high school. I think he's gotten like 2-3 left backs at this point, and that's supposed to be funny for some reason. In the campaign they played together at the start of the season, Eddie introduces us to a D&D character named Vecna. Mike goes to visit Elle and Will is really upset seeing them together because he's in love with Mike, but Elle gets drawn back into her former life after a mysterious death back in Hawkins of cheerleader Christy, going with Dr. Owens and eventually Dr. Brenner to recover her powers, which she lost after closing the gate in season 3. It's interesting to see her go back to Dr. Brenner, to Papa, after everything that he did to her and after she was able to break free of his control. But she does it because she knows her friends need her and she needs to be the one to save the day, because again, who the hell else is going to do it? The US military is hunting them, and Mike, Will, Jonathan, and new character Argyle, who interestingly does not die the same season he is introduced. At this point, you know that if a character is being introduced, they're probably not going to be coming back in the next season. Remember Eddie? Yeah, I have something to tell you. Meanwhile, Joyce and Murray are in Russia, of all places, looking for Hopper. Nancy, who in my opinion has always had a very minimal role to play in the main plot besides being in a love triangle with Steve and Johnson until literally the last season, even though she broke up with Steve in season 1 and dated Jonathan for much longer, who I must say, I don't care for their relationship at all. Get them off my screen for real. But she is important to this season, and her investigation of a family homicide coincides with Elle's struggle to recover her powers. You see, Christy was only the first of 3 others to be murdered in a very unique manner, all her bones broken and her eyes bleeding. And it is similar to another murder some years back, the murder of the Creel family. Mother, daughter, the father who was arrested for the murder, and son Henry, who went missing. Elle is trying to recover her memories of a very important event that resulted in the murder of all the other children at the Hawkins laboratory facility that she grew up in. All this time, the doctors had assumed that it was her, but we learned that it was in fact number 1, the first of the kids with powers and an orderly at the facility, who Eleven defeated and banished to another realm, and who was no other than the missing Henry Creel. Mic drop. No pun intended. You get it? Because it's a character named Mike. You get it. Turns out Henry killed his family using his powers, and it was in fact his blood that gave Elle and all the other kids, including 8 from season 2, their powers. Now Henry, or Vecna, is back, aiming to kill 4 kids in order to reopen the gate and take over the world. His 4th victim, Max. While I really enjoyed the reveal of Vecna, it does introduce a whole lot of questions. First and foremost being, where on earth has he been this whole time? If he was really behind all of this, why was he moving the way he was moving? Why did he only kidnap Will season 1, only to send him back and then use him as a spy, then take Billy, then come back for 4 more, then come back for 12 kids in the final season? He is introduced as being incredibly powerful. Why didn't he use his psychic powers from the beginning? His motives are fuzzy at best, and the logistics are not adding up, quite frankly. He really should have been capable of doing much more than what he has been doing. Yes, Elle has always been his equal, if not greater, as seen in the fact that she stopped him when she was about 8 years old and banished him to another realm, which is crazy. Can we talk about that? She banished him to another realm. What? But why did he rely on the Demogorgon soldiers so much if he's capable of doing mind control and possession on any of the people living in Hawkins? These are the confusions that the Duffer Brothers introduced by creating a new big bad so late in the game. Regardless, the season ends with a bang, showing Elle narrowly saving Max, but not before the gates begin to open again. Now, this season is not without its flaws, if I have not made that clear. Max may be a standout this season, but everyone else falls to the wayside. The fact that the adults are in Russia is such a distraction from the plot and so freaking irrelevant. And then they come back and no one really discusses it. The sheriff of Hawkins died and just came back. What? Eleven's story has kind of been pigeonholed again, and she spends the entire season figuring out how she can again save everyone. Girl, save yourself. Be free. It would have been so easy also to use her rediscovery of her powers to reinforce her characterization. You know, the power of Mjolnir was within her all along moment. And they do kind of do that, but we don't have time to really explore what that means because at the end of the day, she's just a plot device. That's all so that she can save Max. As you can tell, she's my favorite character. I'm so upset with what they did to her and the same BS with Max next season. There's all this potential and they just don't deliver on it. And I guess it's because they don't have time to connect all of the dots and put together all the threads that they've laid out. But this is why you think about things in advance. That's your job as a writer. The plot has been backed into a corner, hence the crazy risks they take this season. And they were clearly confused on how to continue it because although the season ends on a crazy cliffhanger with Max almost dying, actually she does die and then she gets brought back, which leads to the gates being opened. Season 5 opens about a year after season 4 ends, and it kills off most of the momentum of its ending. Since then, Hawkins has been living under military occupation. Nobody can come in or out. It's a time where characters are able to enter and exit the Upside Down whenever they want, basically. Remember when it was toxic? Remember that? Because now it's the new vacation spot. They basically got an Airbnb up in there for the first time, and it is about time. The characters are all finally working together. They have been looking for Vecna in vain, and eventually they discover that Vecna isn't even in the Upside Down, which he has never been in the Upside Down, except for season 4. How has no one peeped that? He is in Dimension X, which is where 11 had originally banished him, but I don't even know if she understands what that was or what that means. Now, there is very important context to understand this season. There is a Broadway play based on Stranger Things that tells the story of Henry and how he got his powers, and despite not being widely available, it is heavily referenced in this season. The play explains that Henry got his powers after vacationing in Hawkins and running into a scientist from Hawkins' laboratory who had a briefcase full of Dimension X particles. When he opens it, he comes into contact with it and is infected by the Mind Flayer. It essentially implies that the Mind Flayer was the big villain all along, which I think underlines the intriguing exploration of the corruption of Henry's humanity that we were beginning to get in season 4. But then in the last episode, Vecna reveals, no, the Mind Flayer didn't really corrupt him. They corrupted each other, which, okay, whatever that means.
Whatever that means.
Vecna sucks this season. Okay, he was so fascinatingly original and he was scary. He was terrifying. He was so interesting when he first comes in season 4. And it was so exciting anticipating what he was going to do next, but his motives go largely unexplained this season. He originally was targeting kids who were suffering from traumatic events, i.e. Chrissy with her emotionally abusive mother and Max struggling after Billy. And even back in season 1,
Will being left alone all the time. But then he decides now he needs 12 kids. Hello? Why? We also learn from the play that most people have not watched that when Henry came in contact with the particles, it changed his blood type. And the particles originally came from Hawkins' lab where Dr. Brenner was experimenting on Dimension X, as his father had actually went there and returned, and he was the only one come back alive. So Brenner has been trying to understand it ever since. Why he then used Henry's blood to create a little superpowered army, and why the military now wants out so badly, honestly, I guess we'll never know. But this season has bigger problems.
The choice to not center any of the original main cast members, but instead focus on Holly Wheeler and all her friends, was exactly that, a choice. Despite the young actress's amazing portrayal of Holly, I do not give a damn about those kids.
Fuck them kids.
When I went to see the finale in theaters, someone literally said during the scene out loud where the kids are trying to figure out how they're going to escape Vecna's house, that they hope that Holly's best friend dies first because she was so annoying. It's true, it was very difficult to have empathy. I want to focus on the original cast, most of whom received very little character development this season and the seasons past, okay? I wanted to have the entire season to say goodbye to them. Joyce literally does absolutely nothing this season. Max is in a coma fighting her way out in Vecna's mind, and somehow, despite her bones being broken and her eyes destroyed in season 4, is fully healed by the end of the season. And listen, she did go blind. It's not just because she was stuck in Vecna's mind, okay? Her eyes were bleeding. Lucas spends this entire season just worrying about Max, and Erica has one funny moment where she drugs her best friend, the consequences of which we are also not ever allowed to see. And 11 is trading. Who even cares about her interior life at this point? Nancy and Jonathan are arguing as usual, and so Steve tries to squeeze in. The army is trying to capture Elle still. Will is again in mortal danger, and Dustin seems to be the only one who cares about Eddie's death at the end of last season. But he really shouldn't be too surprised. Haven't they realized by now, if they meet someone, they'll probably be dead in 2 or so months? The writing this season is abysmal, okay? It very much reads as if Netflix's directive to write the action into the dialogue for the less focused viewers was implemented, despite the fact that Stranger Things has a very dedicated and huge pre-existing fan base, and despite the fact that part of what made Stranger Things so good was its strong writing. They never over-explained things, despite the fact that there were a lot of things to be explained. There was a lot of things communicated via subtlety, and that's what made it so interesting. There are so many scenes that are repeated in the dialogue immediately after, even though we had just seen it. The scene where Holly almost escapes from Vecna and she's falling down and then she gets drawn back up. Immediately after, Nancy explains to us what just happened, even though we just saw it with our own eyes, and that's just one of the examples of the ridiculousness going on this season. Remember, the brilliance of how the subtlety and the show made it so good no longer. This whole season is weak, but not shockingly so, as the show had long ago written itself into a corner with overwhelming plot lines and underwhelming character arcs. One season would not have been enough to fix all of that. Granted, it could have definitely been much better, and the finale did introduce more plot holes, such as Will somehow not dying even though he was connected to the hive mind, no Demogorgons in Dimension X, the Mind Flayer allegedly dying even though we know it exists beyond its physical being and form, and characters simply being forgotten in the epilogue. But I long predicted that the show was going to struggle to land the bird because there was just so much going on. I am very disappointed with how they dropped the ball on Vecna's character. Goodness, I had such high hopes for that. They ultimately just decided to make him evil for evil's sake, and what is even the purpose of that? Thank goodness for Jamie Campbell Bower's very good and fascinating interpretation of this character so that he can go down in history as being interesting, even if he was kind of giving Cat in the Hat in the 4th season, because the writers definitely were no longer contributing to the development of his character. And I must say, Jamie Campbell Bower is the most British-looking man I have ever seen in my life. When he spoke with an American accent in the first flashback in Stranger Things, I was genuinely taken aback. Personally, one of the most annoying parts to me this season was when Robin attempts to explain to Vicky the truth about the Upside Down, and Vicky believes that she must be on drugs. You mean to tell me that you haven't noticed anything weird going on these past couple of years. They want us to think that the people of Hawkins are dumb. Will literally came back from the dead, and the town is under military lockdown. Why would a town need to be under military lockdown? And don't even get me started on Will's coming out scene. They simply did not do a good enough job of conveying the urgency of that moment at the time in which it comes. Will's biggest fear is not being accepted for being gay. Would it not be dying? Would it not be seeing all of his loved ones die? Let alone the fact that not everyone had to be there, which was clear by the fact that half of the room did not move. Literally, half of the room did not get up to give Will a hug. Nancy's in the back like, okay, can we go save my sister now? She could be dead or dying. And I'm pretty sure this is Eight's first time meeting Will. I didn't like the finale, as was the opinion of most people. I literally rolled my eyes when they told us that Elle was not actually dead. Can she be left alone for once in her goddamn life? Why can't she die? Despite the plot holes, the final battle, which was incredibly underwhelming, we spent 10 years building to this moment. So this villain who we have finally discovered was behind all of this, only for it to be over in an instant. I thought for sure there was another twist coming, only for us to have an hour-long episode. While I understand the thought behind it, they wanted us to be able to say goodbye to these characters. I would have preferred saying goodbye to these characters by focusing on their arcs the entire season, not just the hour at the end of it. And what we need to understand also is that fictional stories are glimpses into characters' lives. We are not owed a complete understanding of where they go from here, of how it all ends for them. We just need to see them throughout the main plot. And when we didn't get that, really, when we didn't get all of that in a satisfactory manner, the emotions of the finale felt very unearned. I did bawl my eyes out during the flashbacks, but that was mostly because I was nostalgic over how good the show used to be. The characters felt paper thin this season, all playing second fiddle to another plotline that prioritizes characters that we are not emotionally invested in. This entire season could have been handled so differently. And also, some people needed to die. How did everyone make it out of all of that alive? Come on now. We didn't need another mystery to solve. We just needed to wrap it up. Lucas's character was kind of going somewhere in season 4 with him joining the basketball team and being a bit separate from the boys. And honestly, it's about time that they acknowledge the fact that Lucas, for one reason in particular, might have had a different experience growing up in Hawkins than his best friends. But he does nothing this season. His moment in the epilogue is him going to the movies with Max. Justin and Will get to go to college, and Max and Lucas are at the movies. How satisfying. Mike, I feel, probably has to sacrifice his alleged role as Dungeon Master at this point, or whatever it is they call it, because he has not been the leader for a while. I'm happy that Will finally did something this season and got powers, because he had been a deadbeat for so long. Justin continues to be the brains who discovers that the Upside Down is actually a wormhole that connects to Dimension X, which that didn't shock me. I thought we kind of already knew that. It may have taken me a while to recognize that Dimension X was separate from the Upside Down because they did not specify that enough, in my opinion, and they only really clarified it in interviews. And they kind of just threw it in at the last second and told us to deal with it, even though we had already spent so much time exploring the Upside Down. It's so clear they just came up with all of this at the last possible second. But when I did put 2 and 2 together, I realized that if the Upside Down was formed when Elle made contact with the Demogorgon from Dimension X, and can I just say, the Demogorgons had a crazy power upgrade this season. Since when could they rip portals through the air like that? Then the Upside Down must be the connection point between the real world and Dimension X. Yet we are supposed to be shocked by this revelation. Hopper and Joyce do nothing. Nancy and Jonathan continue to be the worst couple ever. I'm literally so over these two. This is not Love Island. Wrap it up. And why do so many of the character arcs surround romantic relationships? Can they not exist as individuals? Robin contributes to the main plot, and then her girlfriend literally disappears in the epilogue. It is incredibly frustrating to have seen the steady decline of these once vivid and lovable characters. They deserved better. We deserved better. I deserved better. I dedicated half of my life to this show. Okay.
You are like Papa!
The finale was so poorly received that fans convinced themselves, fans who are in my opinion, much more talented than the Duffer Brothers, that the episode 8 finale was actually fake and the real finale was coming later. The theory was essentially, there were different iterations of it. Some people were saying that the fantasy and Vecna mind control began just in the last episode, some saying in part 2, but ultimately it was that what we had seen was part of Vecna's illusion and that none of it was real, and that the real finale in which all of this would be sorted out and they would wake up from this was coming later. And while it initially seemed like a brilliant idea to many, in my opinion, it would have been a horrible idea, okay? Not only would it have cost Netflix potentially money because they wouldn't have been able to advertise their actual last episode, but it would have been emotional manipulation on the audience. I would not have been happy with that. I also don't think it would have been able to solve all of the finales or the season's issues. We would need a time machine for that, let's be honest. And the quote clues that people were coming up with were also all reaches that could have easily been explained by bad writing and set inconsistencies, all of which we know Netflix is capable of. There were definitely random inconsistencies I myself had not previously noticed, i.e. the wheel changing color, but it is still more likely that they ran out of budget than that there's another episode coming out. It was impossible to reason with, however, because all logic was met with, well, that's what they want you to think. And that really is the power of conspiracy theories. You can't talk people down from them. Ultimately, the entire season was poor, so why people were so shocked by the finale, I could not tell you. It is always hard when a show that you are incredibly invested in ends, especially in this way, and I feel for the fans, but this isn't my first rodeo. I can count on my fingers the number of good endings that I've seen. The Netflix documentary also did not help. It fueled rumors of Reddit and ChatGPT being used to write the ending, and it did actually hurt to see some of the writers in the writer room point out consistencies that fans noticed in the finale and being ignored. One of the writers points out the fact that, hey, it doesn't really make sense that they go to the home of the Demogorgons, Dimension X, and they don't come across a single Demogorgon. And the different writers are like, whatever. I know that writer was pissed when he saw people complaining about that online. The Duffer Brothers also continued to shoot themselves in the foot in interviews and being unable to respond to questions about said inconsistencies because, let's be honest, they didn't think of them. They were being lazy. They were already thinking about how in 10 years they're going to reboot the show, bring Elle back after giving her an ambiguous ending, and force all of these actors to recommit to this.
Well, yeah, so we were on set filming Stranger Things 4, and we were all talking about, like, yeah, if there's gonna be like joking, like, oh, they're all gonna have us back in 20 years, and we're all gonna be like fat and old and being like, 11, where are you? You know, that kind of thing. And then I was like, oh, but like, if you guys are actually gonna do a spin-off, it should be this. And I said it, and then the Duffers like looked at each other and they looked at me and they're like, can we talk to you for a second? And then they like pulled me off and they're like, that is the idea. Like, who told you? And I was like, no one. And they were like, what do you mean? You just like came up with it? And I was like, well, no, I just thought that that would be like a cool way to kind of expand. And they were like,
It is.
yeah. And they were like, well, yeah, I don't know. And they were like, yeah, it was really funny. They're like, okay, well, don't tell anyone.
It's so ironic how Elle, when she was introduced in the first season, was struggling because she wasn't being treated as a human. She wasn't being viewed as anything more than a tool. And then the Death Wives did exactly the same thing to her character and only used her as a tool to further the plot. Ugh, it's just, it pisses me off. And after all that, you couldn't just let her die? You couldn't free her from her torment? I would also like to point out how the show ended very similarly to how the first season ended, which I think feeds back into my argument of how, because they didn't know what to do after season 1, they just continued to run season 1 back again and again until we were well and truly sick of it. And you know what? No wonder Mike cannot accept the fact that Al might be dead. Nobody ever freaking dies in this show. Al died and then came back. Will died and then came back. Hopper died and then came back. Of course, El was out there somewhere. If those of the Duffer Brothers lost sight of why they created this world and the characters in the first place and became motivated by, well, money, essentially putting one foot in front of the other for 5 total seasons, not focusing on the bigger picture of continuing the stories of these characters, but thinking about how they could expand the world in a way that would look cool on camera. Even the actors were jaded by the end of the show. Some of them lost their will to act, some of them their ability. I'm a bit sad because I do think that the show hoarded the potential of a lot of these young actors by keeping them for so long. And even now, they're planning a spin-off with the trailer for Stranger Things 85 having come out recently, an animated series that's supposed to be set between the events of the second and third season. I guess after all of the characters just forgot about everything because they returned in season 3 with absolutely no memory of it. None of it is mentioned. They are going to wring this stone of Stranger Things dry. It's really disheartening, honestly, to see how the film and entertainment industries in general, they're no longer concerned with the artistic integrity and creativity, but how things can be monetized and maximized. At that, it's not just television, music even is no longer about telling a story. It's no longer about having a full, complete album. It's about having one single that can go viral on TikTok. All the movies seem to be remakes or sequels. Where is the creativity? And don't get me wrong, things are usually based on other things. You'd probably be surprised to see how many films are based on books you haven't heard of. But people no longer seem to care about finding new original stories. They just want to run back something they know already worked. It's no longer about taking creative risks. It's just, it feels wrong. Capitalism tends to be the death of art as it forces artists to appeal to the specific value of mass marketing and appeal instead of doing what feels true to them and their vision. There are a lot of people mad at Duffer Brothers, but really they're just an example. They're not the problem. Let's go talk to the Netflix higher ups who asked them to make 5 whole seasons when they originally wanted to do 1. With the end of Stranger Things, however, it begs the question of what now for Netflix? It is truly the end of an era. Is it time for a new era? What will now become their new big show? With the upcoming Netflix acquisition of Warner Bros., it's more likely that they will continue to expand on pre-existing fictional worlds, and so it might be a while before we have anything like the cultural phenomenon that was Stranger Things. We are not in a time period where unique and creative stories are being valued. We're not in a time period where intellect is being valued, but that is a whole other story. It's sad. It is. Nothing is good anymore. For me personally, it means I'm going to spend a lot of time hate watching future releases and leaning back into the archives to relive the old greats. So, if you want to follow me along for that journey, you know exactly what to do. Well, there you have it, folks. The end of Stranger Things. Did it end the way that we wanted? Absolutely not. Will we be discussing it for time and time to come? Absolutely. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Please leave any thoughts and comments down below. Go watch another one of my videos if you feel so inclined. And I will see you so soon. Cue the credits.